Rick Santorum, former U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania and former presidential candidate. Rick, thank you for joining us. I talked about in the monologue here, you need eight cabinet secretaries and the vice president Kamala Harris. I think she'd be up for the task of being President Harris. You think they can get 8, and should they? Is this incompetence, or is this some sort of something bigger going on? What are your thoughts?
No, I don't think this is anything. I mean, Corey alluded to it, but I don't think this is any surprise to anyone who has watched Joe Biden. I served with Joe Biden for 12 years in the United States Senate. And frankly, I don't know where Bob Gates got the quote, but he could have gotten it from me, because I have been saying that for years about Joe Biden while I was in the Senate and afterwards when he was head of the Foreign Relations Committee and ranking member. He was always on the wrong side of the issue. I mean, he was always getting it wrong. And it's been consistent throughout his political career that when Joe Biden was picked as vice president for Barack Obama because he brought foreign policy experience doesn't mean competency. And Joe Biden has never been competent on national security. And so I don't think this is a surprise to anybody who's followed his career that he would make this kind of mistakes. And by the way, the border is a foreign policy issue too, and he's making a huge mistake there. I mean, you can just go down the line, and this is the grave concern. I mean, everyone thought, well, Biden was the safe choice. No, the area that the president has the most authority, really plenary power, in other words, unlimited power, is in the area of foreign policy, and it is by far the weakest area of Joe Biden's portfolio.
So this started to unravel over the last 10 days, 12 days now when the Taliban started moving through Afghanistan. And we in the media tend to hype things. And we tend to sometimes, throw a bunch of, we just call it if it bleeds, it leads. We keep throwing a bunch of pictures up of people bleeding, bad things happening, and we hype it. This feels like one of those times where you look back and go, you know what? We didn't overblow this. We didn't blow this out of proportion. This is as dangerous and scary and maybe risk encompassing for the American people and our national security as we've been saying it is, and maybe worse once we leave. Can you imagine what happens when we leave Afghanistan for good? What's going to happen to those poor people left behind?
Well, I think, one of the things that's really not talked about much is the role that Pakistan has played in all of this. They have harbored the Taliban. They have supported the Taliban in every possible way. Everyone says, well, the Afghan army should have been able to fight back. I mean, the Taliban's a ragtag group of folks. No, the Taliban is heavily supported by our, quote, ally, Pakistan, in this effort. And so that is what you're going to see is in many respects, as we've seen, as Pakistan has become a more Islamist state and one that is not friendly to the West, obviously a huge threat to India. And has gotten cozier and cozier with China. This is a potential for really broadening the power of China and Pakistan in the region, which is not going to be. People say, "Oh, it's just Afghanistan; it's a backwater." The bottom line is there is no backwater in the world anymore, and because if you have a base, as we know the Taliban does, to project terror with whether it's Al-Qaeda or any other type of Islamic fundamentalist group, they can project terror all over the world, whether it's cyber terror or actual violent events. The reality is you can be in Afghanistan and coordinate those things now. So this is a real threat to our national security, and it strengthens two entities, Pakistan and China, which are emerging threats. Well, one is a real threat, and one is an emerging threat to our.
We handed them 6 Air Force bases. We handed them a bunch of military assets. We basically gave them a training camp for terror going forward. It's insane what we've done. Quick thought, Rick.
This goes back, and again, you and I may disagree on this, but we hadn't lost a soldier in Afghanistan in a year and a half. We had 2,500 troops there, which is less than we have in most of our bases around the world in which we have a forward deployment. We had a system working where we were supporting the Taliban military, the Afghan military against the Taliban, and we had a stable going on there. And the idea that we could just sort of pick up and leave and everything would be okay. I disagreed with Donald Trump when he made that calculation. And I think, look, Biden screwed it up. Don't get me wrong. He made every wrong call.
Right.
But I think the first wrong call was that we had to leave to end a war. If that's the case, we need to get out of Korea. We need to get out of Germany. We need to get out of the UK. We need to get out of Japan because we're there since the war. and those.
Yep.
And we kept them there. Why? Because it was in our national interest to do so, not Japan's.
Gotcha. Rick Santorum, thank you for being here. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news channel, now in more than 70 million homes. You can get Newsmax TV on your cable system or check your cable guide. And if your system doesn't carry Newsmax, call them, tell them you want Newsmax TV, because we're real news for real people.